Tenemos al distinguido profesor William Browder de la Universidad de Princeton, y él nos va a dar una conferencia magistral.
My title is The Dynamics of Pizza Dough, Higher Dimensional Tailoring, and Samuel Gitler in Projective Space. I noticed that everyone thinks that they are in three-dimensional space, and I live in three-dimensional space. But I'd like to point out that my wife and I live in six-dimensional space, three coordinates for each of us. People think of higher dimensions as something exotic. They think of four dimensions, all right, time. We all live in many, many dimensions, so now, I have very many pictures to present. Unfortunately, I haven't drawn any of them, and so all I have to show here is text. But I thought if I project the text, you can surely correct some of the things that I say orally. Let's see the text. Let's see this. Oops. Okay. First of all, I'd like to say what a moving experience it is to be here today. After the 80th birthday celebration 2 years ago, which was, of course, a much better conference because Sam was there. And to be here for only 2 years was a very moving experience. And we miss him. So, this is good. Sam was a remarkable person, a mathematician of the highest rank, with abundant energy and ambition and a refined appreciation of quality, coupled with an entrancing human warmth and charm. We first met as graduate students in Princeton in the late 1950s. Having studied engineering in Mexico, he succumbed to the charms of mathematics and the influence of visits to Mexico of Solomon Lefschetz, the world famous topologist in Princeton. We were all looking for advisors, and Sam chose Norman Steenrod. He had a reputation as an extremely organized and methodical person, and he demanded similar attributes from his students to the extent of demanding 5 or 6 rewrites of their theses. Sam was undaunted, and he pursued his doctorate unflinchingly with Steenrod. Steenrod was one of the great innovators of the 20th century mathematics, discovering a new method in algebraic topology of enormous subtlety and power, which had immense influence over the years. Sam's early work involved virtuosic skill in these methods. Giving even a small flavor of these methods and techniques to a general audience in the 40 hours allotted to me is hopeless. Oh, wait a second. I only have 40 minutes. 40 hours is what I would take in my introductory topology class. It would still be hopeless. I will instead try to describe the context and nature of some of the problems that Sam solved. Now, it turns out that all the previous speakers have discussed many of these things in detail. But in Sam's spirit, I will persevere and give my own treatment of this. Well, many times, upon identifying myself in a casual conversation as a topologist, I've tried to give some description of the mathematical field of topology. I often say flexible geometry. Where in Euclidean geometry, triangles, squares, and circles are very different things. Made flexible, topologically they're the same. Their size no longer matters. The number of sides or straightness doesn't matter. A familiar example of topology in everyday life is this map of a subway system. If you look at the pocket map of the London Underground, for example, it completely distorts distances, directions, shapes of the tracks, etc., in an irregular way, and preserves only the connectivity to different train lines, how they meet and branch, which stations they go to. The pocket map is a topological representation of the track system in the London Underground. Well, one of the most fundamental methods in mathematics or science in general is the technique of ignoring or forgetting almost everything except the phenomena to be studied. In topology, we ignore magnitudes of distances, but preserve closeness or continuity. The precise definition of continuity, mathematical definition, took 200 years to develop. It's epsilon delta methods. Anyone react to that? With pain or otherwise. So we rely on intuitive notions. We sit at a table and are given a rubber band and a set of pins, together with permission to stick the pins into the table and asked to make a design. When stretched over the pins to form an area inside, constrained by stretching over the pins inserted into the tabletop, and not allowing the band to cross itself, we're playing geometry with stretched rubber band, creating straight lines between the pins, to form triangles, quadrilaterals, etc. But no matter where we put the pins, the topology doesn't change. It is determined by the rubber band on the table. To move on, the pizza baker begins with a large lump of dough and cuts it into smaller lumps. Each cut changes the number of lumps. Each cut causes close parts of the dough to suddenly become remote from each other. The topology is thus changed. So the number of lumps is a topological invariant, a number which depends only on the topology of the situation. The baker begins to expertly spin the dough on his finger and thus expand it and flatten it into approved pizza shape. The topology of the dough doesn't change. The closed portions remain close, but not as close. An apprentice baker, beginning the process, may inexpertly allow his finger to penetrate the dough, leaving a hole in the middle, changing the topology as the points in the middle move out to the inner edge of the hole, not close to each other. He seems to be making a strange donut rather than a pizza. Pizza is a three-dimensional example, and a wonderful two-dimensional example is the Mobius band. We've heard about it so much, and I can't help it. I have to talk about it. One takes a flat piece of ribbon and glues the ends together with a single half twist. Without a twist, we would get a collar or two words with connotation of size and width, but objects which are topologically the same. With a half twist, we find that the two borders of the ribbon are now connected, so the Mobius band has only one edge and only a single side. You can see it in the picture that you now all have in your minds. The single edge is topologically a circle. It goes around and comes back onto itself. So I have one of these. Now I go to my three-dimensional tailor and ask him, sew a round patch on the circle edge. He returns very angry and tells me it's impossible to take my business elsewhere in the future. I take it to my mathematical tailor, who operates in the realm of concepts, and he immediately sews it on and gives me a label that says, projective plane, handmade in abstract space, dry clean. If one detaches the outside red thread around the Mobius band and lets it fall, it does not fall to the floor, but hangs on the band. If you look only at the red thread, the outer edge, and the blue thread running around the center of the band, and let it hang free, you see that topologically it is the same as two linked rings. So that one simply crosses over the other and hangs there. And you can do this in practice. And clearly, you could not blow a nice flat bubble on one of the rings without the other ring piercing it, because it comes right in at the edge. If that bubble met the edge, that thing is right next to the edge, and it goes right through. And so you can't bring these two things apart. They are linked. And they're mathematically linked. My mathematical tailor recommends a skillful four-dimensional tailor. He adds another dimension, time, to the free space we live in, and we have watched him sew on the patch. How does he do it? He lets the red thread, the edge of the Mobius band, go forward slowly into the future. Its trail forming a pink color and leaving the rest of the Mobius band behind. Now, once we go back the next day, we see that the red circle is now a day later, and there's no Mobius band to interrupt it, and we can just put a disk on it. But a day later. I leave it to the philosophers to comment on this important approach to solving other problems in the real world. Just let it go for a while and see if the difficulty is no longer visible. Another way to think of it is to consider a color as the equatorial zone on a globe and an observer at the center of the globe. The observer is a mathematical version of the mythological Janus, who had an extra eye in the back of his head. Our Janus has only two eyes, but one forward and one back. He sees two images, but he is conditioned to see them as one. What does he see in the equatorial band? One side is down on the opposite side. So up on one side is down on the other as he looks with his two eyes. And rotating to the right is the same as rotating to the right. And so he's seeing the Mobius band. He goes, if you think of it as going halfway around with our eyes, it looks like a complete revolution to him, because he sees two opposite points on the end. The end is the same. On the other hand, it's up on one side and down on the other. So he sees the Mobius band. But the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere are identified exactly together. And so what he's seeing is the projective plane. So Janus sees the projective plane. While this may be a three-dimensional description, he's working in a non-Euclidean way. This three-dimensional space is not the ordinary three-dimensional space. If we set our Janus in Euclidean space in higher dimensions, say n plus 1, and he looks at the night sky, the n-sphere, he sees what we call the real n-dimensional projective space, or RPN. R refers to the fact that the parameters describing our Euclidean space are real numbers, but also reality. The question then arises, what is the smallest n so that the higher n-dimensional Euclidean space, Rn, described by n real parameters, contains a copy of Rpn? We say that Rpn embeds in n space. And we show that Rp2 embeds in 4 space. So while the description for Rp2 is very old, what we call classical, but for higher dimensions, the smallest n for a given n, such that Rpn embeds in Rn, remains a mystery, as we've heard about so much Don's talk. And so some early results, some easy results. Huff showed that RPN does not embed in Rn plus in n plus 1 space, n bigger than 1. Frank Peterson, 1957, showed if n is a power of 2, then RPN does not embed in 2n minus 1 space. So that's exactly the situation in 2 dimensions. And now the proofs of those 2 results would fit into my second course in algebraic topology, another 2 hours. But very soon after, life became very complicated. For example, then Gitler and Mahomol showed that if n is a power 2 plus 5, n greater than 13, RPN does not embed in 2n minus 4 space. I think that sounds familiar, unless I made a mistake. So Don has said a great deal about this. Now, general results of Hershey-Smale reduce the problem. A closely related notion to embedding is the notion of immersion. We just heard quite a bit of that. Intuitively, the space is trying very hard to be embedded, and it succeeds locally near every point. But as you travel around, you find that other points from far away have arrived at points already occupied. You find this wall, somebody's built in the same space an obstruction to going through. And that's called a self-intersection. And Hirsch and Smale, or Smale and Hirsch, reduced this problem completely to algebraic topology problems, some of which are very difficult. Now, RPN immerses in n plus 1 space for n equals 1, 2, 3, and 7. And Milner showed that RPN does not immerse in 2n minus 2 space for n power of 2. Go back in 1957. And of course, a little more complicated, Sam proved that RP20 does not immerse in 36 space, which is a special case of result, much easier to state. Now, Don is the world expert on these problems, and I was saying here that he's probably able and probably willing, or did, at the drop of a hat, reel off untold numbers of amazing results of this kind. Look at his tables. They're so much fun to look at. They're really great. Well, looking at the table, I find 40 cases at least where the problems were solved by Sam and his collaborators. So this is a very central part of this book. So thank you very much.
Pues si no tenemos preguntas, agradecemos nuevamente su conferencia.